if the universe is infinite, then everything has happened already. Everything is happening at the same time. So really, it's not linear. We perceive it as that, but somewhere I'm with him, somewhere he's with me. Like I'm able to kind of conceptualize that he's not really gone. Despite losing my son, despite having a daughter with cancer, I can feel intense gratitude and intense grief at the same time. Grief was just very crystallizing for me. It was kind of like the final death knell for all of the things I believed growing up.
This is Time and Other Thieves, reflections and conversations on the nature of existence. I'm Sarah B., and today I'm sharing parts of a conversation I recently had with local mother, writer, and veterinarian, Kat Ashe. I know Kat thanks to Asheville FM, where she volunteered for a couple years in various capacities, including music reviewer, office manager, and host of the talk show, Calling All Species, in which she shared her veterinary knowledge and interviewed others who worked with animals in some capacity. She also fielded calls and emails from listeners who were welcome to ask her anything pet-related. About 3 years ago, Kat took an indefinite break from Asheville FM, a few months before giving birth to her fourth child, Gemma. There was an element of poetry to this goodbye, as Kat had actually started volunteering at the station a few months after her third child, James, had died in early infancy due to complications of Trisomy 18, a chromosomal condition that causes abnormal organ development. Also known as Edwards syndrome, it reduces average life expectancy to as little as 3 days, 2 weeks at the most. That's an average. About 50% of these souls don't survive birth, while about 10% survive 1 year, and a very small number have lived into their 20s and 30s, with significant developmental delays and requiring full-time care. Kat's son, James, lived for 5 months and 1 day. She told the story of his death at a Moth Story Slam, a 6-minute tour de force. The video on YouTube is called simply The Moth Story Slam, and it was posted on April 5th, 2020. You can't watch it without getting choked up, if not full-on sobbing, which it sounds like someone in the audience does on at least 2 occasions. Kat herself cries here and there, but she manages to keep her voice strong, never succumbing to emotion. Her poise is incredible. It's no wonder that Kat has won at least 3 Moth Story Slams, the first being in October of 2017, when the theme was creepy, and she told the story of James's home burial. In 2018, Kat was selected for the Moth Grand Slam. That's where 10 winners from the previous year compete, in this case at the Diana Wortham Theater. And she won. The theme was When Worlds Collide, and Kat told the story of James's birth, for which she had a C-section to increase his chances of surviving. And though she would have preferred to have a vaginal birth, preferably with dolphins swimming around her and Enya playing in the background, Kat ultimately realized, as she says at the end of that winning Grand Slam story, what difference does it make how they come into this world? What matters is that they come at all. I remember the first time I met Kat. She was standing on the sidewalk in front of the radio station, waving pleasantly to the cars that passed by on Haywood Road so they might see our white tent and be alerted to the opportunity to give us money. I don't remember if it was a spring or a fall fund drive, but it was very sunny and Kat wore short sleeves. I introduced myself. She said she loved my show, Songs for Friends. Said her friend Paul introduced her to it. I'd met her friend Paul at a recent radio station meeting, and he'd mentioned his friend Kat, whose son had just died, and said she also wanted to start volunteering, thought it might be good for her. "Oh," I said to her on the sidewalk, remembering, "you had a son." "Yes, my son died," she said. Almost, it seemed, so I wouldn't have to. When talking with Paul, I'd pictured Kat as an older woman, therefore with an older son who'd died. Not this blonde 30-something in bright blue leggings. That's when I learned how very young James had been. I also learned that cat Ashe doesn't sugarcoat anything. She's a straight shooter. You never have to guess how she's feeling. I remember running into her downtown one day and asking, as we do, how she was doing. "Not great," she said. Her honesty gave me an opportunity to express sympathy, to offer whatever tiny kindness I could, and engage in a real exchange with her. Whereas if she'd just said, "I'm good, how are you?" we wouldn't have known each other any better, in which case, what's the point of exchanging words at all? Over her tenure at Asheville FM, I continued to catch glimpses of Kat's grieving process. I was on social media then, and I read her beautifully, brutally written Facebook posts about it, many of which were accompanied by pictures of James, oxygen tubes in his nostrils and taped to his chubby cheeks. The birth of her daughter Gemma was a decidedly joyous development in Kat's life, and many Facebook posts featured her adorable, always smiling face. And Kat continued to grieve her son's death. I got the impression that some days it felt like more than she could bear. And then, in December of 2019, Kat's second-born, Hazel, then 5 years old, was diagnosed with leukemia. And 3 months later, when Hazel was going through the most intense phase of chemotherapy, pandemic happened. I asked Kat to come on the show because I wanted to know how she's managed to cope with all this. Time and Other Thieves is about the nature of existence, and much of what characterizes our human lives is difficulty, hardship, pain, suffering. I figured Kat must be something of an expert on this subject matter. We spoke at my house on a cold December night after eating lasagna together. I asked her to start with the story of Hazel's cancer diagnosis.
It was a month from her birthday. She turned 6 in January. And the first time I noticed something was wrong was when she came to me convinced she'd been poisoned because she was out playing with her sister and her best friend and said, "I chewed on this leaf." And she showed me a leaf and it was from a rhododendron or something. And she's like, "Is it poisonous?" And I said, "I don't think so, but we'll look it up." And so we called poison control. We consulted and everyone was like, "No, it's not poisonous." But it was a really weird thing for her to ask me about. And that was when I first noticed her behavior changing, because really she was never sick prior to her diagnosis. It was all behavioral. And so she got really obsessed with germs. She wouldn't let me touch anything dirty and then touch her. Like if I picked up a rock off the ground, she wouldn't let me touch her afterwards. She wouldn't let her food touch the table. If it touched the table, she wouldn't eat it. Like it was just this really intense obsession with germs, which she'd never had before.
Fascinating, right? I know.
And so I knew something was going on. She would tell me things like, "I think I swallowed a Lego because my throat hurts," and she'd point to her throat, or "My chest hurts. I think I swallowed a Lego and didn't realize it." And just weird behavior all out of the blue. And there's a condition in kids called PANDAS. Have you ever heard of PANDAS?
Mm-mm.
It's something to do with sudden psychiatric changes in children that have been diagnosed recently with strep.
PANDAS stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders Associated with Streptococcal Infections.
So it can cause motor tics and all these other things. And it's very poorly understood. Some doctors don't believe it exists. Some doctors do. But some kids will get strep infections and then shortly thereafter they'll develop motor tics and verbal tics and behavior changes. And a course of amoxicillin will fix it. So they think it's strep caused. So when she started doing this, I thought she's probably got PANDAS. And I took her to her pediatrician and her pediatrician was like, "I think she has PANDAS. Have you heard of that?" And I was like, "I have." And so knowing me, I lost a child in 2017. So she knew that I was very on top of things. He was medically fragile. So she knew that my intuition that something was off was probably accurate from those prior experiences with my son. So she ran blood work on her. And it was Thanksgiving week. So we went home for Thanksgiving. On Wednesday, I called because I hadn't heard, and they said the blood work looked great. They had one of the other doctors review it, and everything looked fine. Keep on the amoxicillin for possible PANDAS. We'll recheck her in a week. And that was the last I heard of it until Sunday morning when her doctor called me. I was asleep in bed. Her doctor called me and said that the original doctor had missed a small flag at the bottom of her blood work. Her blood work itself, just looking at it, looked normal, but at the bottom there was a nondescript little marking that said other cells in circulation. And so I asked her what the other cells were, because I already had a sinking feeling where this was going, just because nobody calls you on a Sunday and says, oh, by the way, your blood work was fine, but like as soon as she said that but, I was like, something is really wrong. And so she said she has lymphoblasts circulating in her bloodstream, and I'm a veterinarian. Cats and dogs get lymphoma and leukemia, and lymphoblasts are the hallmark cell of those conditions. And as soon as she said it, I said, you mean she has leukemia? And she said, I really hope I'm wrong. I really hope this is a mistake on the blood work. So they sent us straight to the hospital, and she was diagnosed within about 48 hours. She had to go through a bone marrow aspirate and a spinal tap and have a port placed once they diagnosed it. And it was the same hospital where our son died. So there was a lot of, around the same time, he died January 2nd of 2017. She was hospitalized for leukemia in December of 2019. So it was very familiar situation.
And what was Hazel's awareness of what was going on, why she was getting this spinal tap, etc.?
Well, I mean, she was 5, so she understood the concept of being sick. We talked about what we would tell her, like, would we tell her that she could die from this? Because I don't know if a 5-year-old really, they definitely have a sense of what death is, but I don't know that telling her she could die, I don't know that it would have benefited her any, and the prognosis for her type of leukemia is excellent with a 97% cure rate after 2.5 years of chemo, unfortunately. But so she was just a trooper. I mean, she was just, nurses loved her. She was happy. She, my friend, I have a large Facebook group of veterinary friends. There's 15,000 of us. And within 3 days, we were inundated with hundreds of gifts. So for her, it was kind of like a big party, other than the, needles and catheters and that kind of stuff. But she was pretty tough through it all.
And has her understanding of this illness changed since those early days?
I think so, because she's almost 8 now. She'll be 8 next month. So I know it's crazy. She's had leukemia, almost half of her life now. But I think she's matured in her understanding of what it means to be chronically ill. But she's just, I think kids deal with this kind of stuff so much better than adults do. She's so much more resilient than I would be, I think, in that circumstance.
Yeah, they don't take it as personally.
No, I guess they don't they don't. They're not like, my body's betraying me, which is what I would be, like when my son was diagnosed in utero with a chromosomal disorder. And immediately my first thoughts were, what did I do wrong? Was my body, like, did I drink something the day he was conceived? Did I expose myself to chemicals at work? Because I'm a veterinarian. So I was like, did I radiate myself accidentally? Like, you go through that litany of how did I do this? What did I do to cause this? Which is really human hubris, that we have that much control, that we're causing cancer in ourselves and our children. And to some extent we may be with plastics and that kind of stuff. But, we look for a reason this happened and why it's our fault, and kids are like, it just happened.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how she was. She's never been like, why did this happen to me? She's like, I have cancer.
I next asked Kat how she reacted when it was first becoming clear that we had a pandemic on our hands.
I'm still having my reaction 2+ years later.
You're brand new to this. I have a child with cancer life. And then, so she got diagnosed in December, and then COVID happened.
March is when it all shut down.
How did you cope?
Well, at first I think I was like everybody, like, oh, it's going to be a nice little holiday from life responsibility. I'll stay home. I bought jigsaw puzzles. I'll write in my journal. I'll read the books that are stacking up because I'm so busy with my work and my kids. And at first it was lovely. It was kind of like wintering. And then, that started to get old. I did all the puzzles. I read all the books. And then the reality set in, like I think it did for everybody, that it was not going to be over quickly. And it was going to be a long, hard slog.
How worried were you about Hazel with COVID?
Well, at first I was really worried because, initially people weren't taking, I wouldn't say people are great about masks now, but they're definitely better than they were. At first we didn't go anywhere. We locked down and stayed home. We didn't see anybody. And, for kids, like I have a 3-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 10-year-old, and 2 of their years of their lives have been in social isolation. They go to school now, but they, you take for granted how much of a person's facial expression happens under their eyes. Like, I see people every day at work with masks, and there are people I cannot read. I'm like, I don't know what you're thinking because I can't see your face.
Right.
And for kids, it must be even harder. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's a weird time to be alive.
But having to go to chemo
Yeah.
sessions, I don't know what they're called.
Mm-hmm.
In those early days must have been
It was
so
terrifying.
stressful.
And even, I will be honest, even the oncologists and stuff weren't super serious about it when it first happened. I think everyone was so shocked that it turned out to be such a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all wanted to believe it's going to be like a cold or the flu, or not that many people are going to die. And we're now, to like 850 people have died in this country alone. And so I think even at the beginning, there was kind of it's going to be okay. We'll wear masks, but it's probably fine. And it was hard. And she was in an intense part of chemo when it happened too. She was in what's called frontline chemo. She's now in maintenance chemo, which is just low dose daily chemo to keep her in remission or cured. But then she was in like consolidation. There was a month period where every Monday she had to go under anesthesia for a spinal tap. For a month of spinal taps every Monday. And so, she'd be under anesthesia and she had to have a mask off so she could have oxygen prongs in her nose. And, it was terrifying.
What would you say has been the hardest part of this whole experience with Hazel being sick?
Getting other people to understand. I mean, that's the biggest struggle, especially with COVID. We've really struggled to get people to understand why we've chosen not to go places or do things. And, every single day is a mental calculation. Like, I'm constantly doing COVID math in my brain. Like, is this risk worth it? What is the risk here? And there's no definites. There's no, you don't have constants and unknowns. It's all an unknown. So, should I take her to Trader Joe's with me? It's mid-afternoon, so it'll be fairly, you just go through these things, and it's just to do a simple thing like take her to the library is just mental gymnastics. Like letting them go back to school, that was a huge decision. And we let them go because Buncombe County has a mask mandate and they've stuck with it and they enforce it. Both of my older kids are in school and their teachers know that she has leukemia, and they're very vigilant about making sure kids are careful. Bus is a different story, but... So yeah, it's just, that's the hardest thing is people like, well, you let them do this. And I'm like, do you understand how much mental energy it took or maybe I was just tired that day. And I'm like, I don't care anymore. Just let's go to the toy store. Let's just have a normal day with masks, And that's been really hard. There's people who just do not get it. And
friends,
family. That's the worst part, is that there's family who just brush it off. Or I had one family member say to me, you let them go to your dad's funeral. I was like,
right.
I was like, and the person said, well, you don't know the status of everybody at the funeral. I was like, that was their grandfather and my father. Yeah. She wore her mask and N95 the entire time, except for when we ate afterwards. And that was only family, and everybody in that room was vaccinated. Like, but they threw that up in my face as is like, well, you let them do this, so you clearly just don't care.
Right.
And it was painful because that was somebody I loved deeply, and I was shocked that they said that to me. I was stunned.
And then there was that time Hazel broke her leg. That was another challenge. In
October of 2020, 6 months into COVID, 9 months into diagnosis, she was riding her... I had taken 2 nights away at a hotel in town. My husband said, go stay at a hotel, enjoy yourself for a couple nights. Super excited. I hadn't done it. COVID, whatever. I was staying in the brand new Aris downtown. I slept one night. My phone was dead because I'd forgotten my charger, and my phone in the hotel room rings. And I was like, nobody knows I'm here except my husband. I was like, who is calling me on the hotel phone? She had been riding her bike and broke her leg. She fell off. Well, first of all, he didn't know that. He knew she was hurt, so he FaceTimed me after I found a cord for my phone and showed me her leg, and I was like, her leg's broken. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, I'm sure. I'll be home in 10 minutes because it was downtown and we live in Candler. So I got home. I could see visibly that the leg was probably broken, so I took her to the vet clinic just to be sure, because I didn't want to drag a kid with cancer and chemotherapy to the ER for a sprain. Yep. And I was like, I'll take her to the clinic. We'll shoot a quick x-ray. Clear as day, broken distal tib-fib fracture. Oh, it gets better. It gets so much better. So it's a very clean, simple fracture. It's not open. It's a closed fracture. Reduction with a cast. 6 weeks, it'll be healed. We have to go to the ER. They put a temporary splint on it. We go to the orthopedist, the pediatric orthopedist a couple days later to get the official cast put on. They take off the splint and she has a scab on her leg. And I was like, that looks really inflamed. And they're like, yeah, it's inflamed a little. And so she had a scab. It was a dime-sized scab, but all around it was red and a little puffy, and it was redder than you would think. And I said, she's on chemo and her neutrophil count's really low. She's very immunosuppressed right now. And they're like, yeah, we see it. And I was like, do you think it's a good idea to put a cast over that? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. I'm like, you're sure it's okay? And they're like, we're sure. So they casted it. Within 36 hours, she was laying on the couch and she'd be fine. And then she would shriek at the top of her lungs and start thrashing around. So I called and they're like, oh, it's just itching. It's normal. Kids itch. We'll do some Benadryl. So I waited a few hours and she literally felt terrible. She had a low-grade fever. She went into my bed and she was just rolling from side to side screaming. And I was like, this is not itching. I know my child. So I called them back. They're like, we'll take her to the ER. They'll cut the cast off. I go to the ER. They're like, we don't normally cut casts off. I'm like, the oncologist sent us. You need to cut it off. She had a dead spot, probably, I don't know, what is that, 2 inches diameter, where that scab had been. It had all died. So they admitted her because she had an infection, an inflammatory response and an infection. They admitted her. I was like, when are we going to go in there surgically and debride all that dead? I'm sorry, in human medicine, they say debride. In vet med, we say debride. I said, when are we going to go in there and debride all that dead tissue? And they're like, we're going to wait and see how it turns out. And I was like, that's all dead. It's not going to get any better. You have to go in there and take it out. And the surgeon was like, we're just going to wait a day and just see. She had 4 surgeries to clean out all the dead tissue. She was in the hospital for 10 days. She went under anesthesia 4 times, full anesthesia, intubated, had to have it debrided 4 times. We couldn't touch her leg. She wouldn't let us help her to the bathroom. Any kind of movement of her leg, she would shriek at the top of her lungs. She was on morphine, fentanyl, Ativan. They would give it and it wouldn't do anything. They would give it again. And finally she would eventually go to sleep, but it was awful. And then when she came home, I had to do antibiotics in her port for her for another 4 weeks after we got home. So I was like, her port was already accessed. So her port is under the skin, but she had an access in it. And so I would have to give her IV antibiotics in that port every day. And so you're trying to be a mom and support your kid who's super stressed out and super reactive to everything, and then you're trying to give the medication at the same time, and I couldn't do both. So the first night we got home and I gave it, she was screaming, I was crying because it was awful. It was terrible. And then it got worse because once it healed partly, they wanted to put a cast back on it, and I was like, you're not going to cast over this, it's not fully healed. And they were like, it'll be fine. I'm like, that's what you said the first time. So we ended up switching doctors because they wouldn't listen to me. And I was like, I told you the first time it looked infected and nobody even thought we need to put her on antibiotics or anything. They're just like, it's fine. I was furious. So that was the worst.
God, how do you deal? How do you physically, mentally deal with seeing your child suffering like that?
I think my husband will never get over it. He was like, that broke me in some fundamental way. And I was like, for me, because I've dealt with animals and injuries and wounds, like we see animals that get in dog fights and cat fights, and we see wounds like that all the time. So the physical manifestation of it for me wasn't as traumatic because I've seen wounds like that before. The emotional thing was a completely different component, like watching her shriek in pain and not be able to convince people to listen to me. It was hard.
On episode 13 of Time and Other Thieves, I talked about Meister Eckhart's Book of Divine Consolation, and in that discussion I referenced an Amy Hempel short story called The Harvest, the first part of which ends with the following sentence. What happened to one of my legs required 400 stitches, which, when I told it, became 500 stitches, because nothing is ever quite as bad as it could be. Kat's story, none of which is fiction, of course, reminds me of this concept that things could always be worse. Your infant son died? Okay, now your daughter has cancer. Your daughter has cancer? Okay, now there's a pandemic on. And now your cancer-stricken daughter has a broken leg, and now that leg is infected and she has to have multiple surgeries. Just grieving a dead child and having another with cancer starts to sound relatively bearable, which I say with the utmost humility because I haven't experienced a fraction of this kind of stress and heartache. Is that because I couldn't handle it? Is it true what they say, that God, or whatever, never gives us more than we can take?
You were still really grieving when Hazel got diagnosed. I wonder, would the you before that diagnosis have thought you could handle that?
Part of me, ever since I've been a mother, has been waiting for bad news. I really... And then after James died, there was literally a large part of me that was like, when is the other shoe going to drop? Like, I was just waiting for some other bad news. And I've always been terrified of one of my kids having cancer as children. So when it happened, it was shocking, but also not shocking. Like, I was like, of course she has cancer. Why not? Like, it was a dumb joke we'd make. Like, my husband and I make this joke all the time. I'll be like, I have a headache. He's like, it's probably cancer. I'm like, you're probably right. Like, it's just so yes, I don't know if I would have thought, could I but I knew after losing my son, I could probably just survive mostly anything. Would I come out the other side unscathed? No. But would I survive? Yes. I would have thought I could survive it. I would not want to think about it, but I think I would have known I could survive anything.
Do you believe what doesn't kill you makes you stronger?
I don't know. I don't think that's true for everybody.
Yeah.
I had a very good friend, and she lost her son to suicide when he was 15, and she found him. And she was a veterinarian, and he used her euthanasia solution to commit suicide. And she never recovered, and she lived 2 more years before she took her own life. And actually, the anniversary of that was December 20th. It's just her son. She did it on her son's birthday. And so, no, I don't think that's true for everyone. I think there are things that break some people irrevocably. And I don't know what makes the difference between me and her, like why I could keep going and she couldn't. But again, the empathy I have, I don't judge. I'm like, I'm much stronger than she was. I'm just like, I'm grateful I'm still here. I do think there's only so much people can take. But I genuinely, whenever I start to go down that really, I've struggled lately. I told you I don't like this time of year. Hazel's diagnosis, James's final illness and death, it's all tied up with Christmas, which I also have a lot of mixed feelings about because I'm not religious, but it was a huge part of my childhood. And I did love the Christmas traditions. It's a whole big mess, but the point of that is to say what? Where was I going with that? Oh, I look at Holocaust survivors. Maybe that's an extreme. Like, maybe I shouldn't use that as my barometer, but I'm like, if people can survive a concentration camp and go on to have meaningful lives. After seeing the kind of absolute abject evil that can exist if you believe in moral black and white. Most of us agree Nazi Germany was pretty evil. So, if you can look at that and live through that and go on and find meaning in life, then, I think you can survive most things.
I remember seeing a comment back when I was on social media, and it was Hazel was newly diagnosed, and I would occasionally see one person writing about God having a plan.
I don't believe there's some grand universal plan to this. I don't think God gives cancer to kids. Like I said, I don't really believe in the idea of a God, maybe, like I said, some kind of energetic force, but not a God. But I just ignore them for the most part. I know my whole family is very religious, so I know where it comes from, and I know that it's going to be spitting into the wind if I try to debate that or say anything about it. So I'm just like, thanks for thinking of us.
Yeah. I think my thought was like, if God is going to protect Hazel, why did he give her the damn cancer in the first place?
Right. Or I struggled with that, especially I made a lot of friends in the Trisomy community. My son had Trisomy 18, and Trisomy kid would get sick and everyone would pray and they would get better and they'd be like, God is good. This is God's plan. I'm like, so God's plan was to let my kid die, but that kid live. Like, where does that fit into things? So, but again, I try to be kind in my head that is their belief system. And I think it's how some people order the world. They believe that there's a plan because otherwise it's hard to cope with the idea that it's just chaos.
Yeah.
And there is no plan.
You think it's chaos?
I don't know that I think it's chaos necessarily, but I don't think there's some unifying theme. I think we're energy, and energy never dies. It's neither created nor destroyed. So it goes somewhere and when my son died, he went somewhere, the energy that was him, I don't know where, but it's not gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's organized. Like, I don't think he's in Tina's body over there.
Yeah.
Tina is my dog.
Or, wherever. Not very Buddhist of me, but I'm not a Buddhist, so.
Yeah. Do you identify as anything?
Board agnostic. I'm open to the idea that there's some unifying force behind the universe, but I don't know what it is. I just finished a book. It's actually a graphic novel by Alison Bechdel. Her most recent book was written in 2021 during COVID, and it was about her search for meaning through exercise. So the whole book is like charts her from being 10 years old to being born to being now when she's in her 60s, and like all the different exercises she's done. But it's all been a search for meaning underneath it all. And she talks about Kerouac a lot and Wordsworth and like the Transcendentalist it's a good book. It's a really good if you like graphic novels. But at the end, she kind of has this epiphany that nirvana is samsara. And it was interesting because she's talking about the Buddhist idea that we're trying to attain nirvana, which is basically nothingness.
That Alison Bechdel book is called The Secret to Superhuman Strength. I think Kat Ashe could write one with the same title that focused on emotional feats instead of physical. I asked her to talk about her experience with grief. Not just the grief that comes with having a child with cancer and having to watch that child suffer, but the grief of actually losing a child, which is every parent's nightmare. There's an episode of the HBO show 6 Feet Under, one of my most favorite shows of all time, in which a character named Maggie talks to one of the main characters, Nate, about losing her son, who was 2 when he died. She points out that, in English at least, there is no word for a parent who's lost a child. If a child loses a parent, they're an orphan. A wife whose husband has died is a widow, and a husband whose wife has died is a widower. But Maggie says that losing a child is too awful for any word to adequately convey. If you're just tuning in, Kat's son James died about 5 years ago when he was 5 months old.
When I first met you, it was very new.
Yes, he had died a few months, been a few months at most.
And you started volunteering at Asheville-based as a way to get back out in the world and
do something.
Yeah.
Do something.
Yeah.
So grief had a very crystallizing effect for me as far as what I think about how the universe works. Mm. I was raised, like I told you, Southern Baptist with very strict beliefs about what happens after you die. You go to heaven if you accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. And he's an all-loving, all-knowing God, despite the fact that he wiped out all the first humans with the flood. And I don't know how blasphemous I'm allowed to be on the radio, but I don't buy into the Baptist creed anymore. I don't believe any of that. But seeing my son die, he died in my arms. I was holding him when he died, and being there for his death and we let him die. We took him off his ventilator and let him pass away because he had been very sick for a handful of days with not a great prognosis for recovery. And, the intervention needed to keep his body alive was steadily increasing in intensity, knowing that his body was not built to survive. If, quote unquote, we'd let nature take its course after he was born, he probably would have never survived as long as we did. But we did interventions that we thought were in his best interest. They kept him comfortable. It was really, he was in palliative and hospice care for a baby.
Yeah. And it was a real miracle that he survived birth.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we were very deliberate in our choices. I chose to have an elective C-section to give him the best chance of survival. And I had never had one before, and I was terrified. But it was fine. But after he was born, it opened my eyes to... I was raised very pro-life. Pro-choice was not something that was murdering babies. That's what I was told, it was murdering babies. And then James was born, and he was on a ventilator at home. He had nasal oxygen. He had a feeding tube. He had 13 medications that I had to give 2 to 3 times a day. He was very medically fragile. And I am a doctor of veterinary medicine, but a lot of it translates. I was very comfortable with his oxygen, with putting a feeding tube in him because I do the same in animals. But I'm a relatively wealthy white woman in America with a supportive spouse, a supportive family, a supportive medical system, and the ability to just quit my job basically and stay home with him. And then I look at a woman who is the only breadwinner for the family, has other children, and is given this diagnosis. And, you know, I was raised with the idea that aborting that child would be murder. And that's just, his birth gave me intense empathy for not just people in that situation, but just people in general. Like, you just don't know what situations people are facing when they're forced to make decisions, or even when they're not forced, when they have to make a decision about something. You cannot possibly know their motivations, understand where they're coming from, unless you sit and listen to what they have to tell you, which most people don't.
Right.
So grief was just very crystallizing for me. It was kind of like the final death knell for all of the things I believed growing up about how the world works. And then seeing him die, seeing how peacefully he died. And not everybody dies peacefully, I understand that. But the peace after death really removed any fear I ever have of myself dying. Like, I don't worry about that anymore. His death also kind of reminded me that I kind of don't view, we live as humans, I think, we have a perception of time as linear, and I don't think time is truly linear. I'm not a physicist. I'm not an astrophysicist. But if I had to think about time, like you think about eternity, if the universe is infinite, then everything has happened already. Everything is happening at the same time. So really, it's not linear. We perceive it as that, but somewhere I'm with him, somewhere he's with me. Like, I'm able to kind of conceptualize that he's not really gone. He's still with us, but not where we can sense him in this way we're stuck in living, I guess. It's a good way to cope with grief, I think.
Comforting.
It is comforting for me, whereas heaven was never comforting. Even growing up, I was like, the idea of heaven is really scary to me, just like infinitely rejoicing about God. Like, I don't, like, it scared me. I was like, I don't want to live forever. Like, what would the meaning of anything be if it was eternal? But then my family tell me I just don't understand the mind of God. And I'm like, well, clearly.
And you do. Wow.
Yeah, right. I'm like, clearly I don't understand the mind of God, but nor do you. So how do you know it's going to be good? Maybe it's going to suck. I don't know.
You're listening to Time and Other Thieves. I'm Sarah B., joined today by local mother, writer, veterinarian, and former Asheville FM DJ, Kat Ashe. I asked her to come on the show and talk about her experience of losing a child. Her son James died of Trisomy 18 in January of 2017 when he was 5 months old, and of having another child with cancer. Her daughter Hazel was diagnosed with leukemia in December of 2019. She's experienced a lot of grief and terror in her 42-ish years, and I wanted to know how she's done it.
Therapy. I see a counselor, and I can tell when I haven't been seeing my counselor because my mental health suffers. So just having someone to listen and to suggest, have you thought about this, or have you done this technique? Like, counselors taught me grounding techniques for panic attacks, which make a huge difference if you've ever had panic attacks. Just using, there's several. I use the 5 things you see, 4 things you hear. That technique really helps break the anxiety.
Maybe say the whole technique for people.
Oh, I always forget it. It's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. But the idea is to go through your senses, seeing being the easiest one. It distracts your brain from going down that anxiety spiral if you're going to have a panic attack, and it's been effective for me. Deep breathing exercises, box breathing has helped, which is where you breathe in and imagine the shape of a box in your head as you breathe in, and then make the box in your brain as you breathe. Yeah, and there was tapping. I've never tried, but I've heard that doing the tapping can help. So therapists have given me a lot of tools to use to break the anxiety spiral. I do take an antidepressant. I don't always know if I need one because I feel like my depression is situational. Like, it's true. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people who are depressed for reasons that their serotonin's out of whack or their dopamine's out of whack. For me, I'm like, I'm depressed because my kid died and I have a kid with cancer and I'm living in a pandemic. Like, I think we all need Lexapro. I think it should just be in the water.
Right.
Just put it in the water and everybody, and some little bit of Xanax, just a touch, everybody will be fine.
Right.
So I do take Lexapro, and I try to be mindful. I'm so sick of hearing the word mindful, but I do try to be mindful. I try to be in the moment and not worry too much about tomorrow or what happened yesterday. I'll just be there at the time I can be. And writing, I still write.
You doing a blog?
No, I'm mostly just write freehand now. And then every now and then I post some long rambling thing on Facebook. I have been working on and off on a book, but it's one of those types of things that I feel like won't be done mentally until I'm like 70, because I have to live the whole experience to write about it, which maybe is, I don't know, maybe that's silly to think that I don't have anything to say yet. But sometimes it does feel like I'm still in the process of figuring this grieving thing out. But then I feel like I do maybe have something valuable to tell other people that are grieving. So yes, I would like to publish something officially, but I don't know when that'll happen.
You're saying you're waiting for the grief to be done?
Not done so much as, like, it's been 5 years. And so the person and the place I am now are vastly different than where I was 5 years ago. Vastly different. So I imagine 5 more years beyond that, I'll be in a place where, I feel like trying to write about grief when you're in it is so consuming and emotional that you have to be farther away from it to really say something that's going to speak to people. And it always helped me after he died to meet people who had gone through what I'd had, but were many years beyond it. Because at first it gave me hope, like, you're going to be okay. You're going to survive. Look at these other people. And also because hearing how they got through it, or that they got through it, kind of helped me figure out how to keep moving.
Did you always deal with anxiety attacks or panic attacks?
Yeah, I started having panic attacks when I was 18. 19 was my first one. I remember it very distinctly.
Yeah.
Yes, this is so embarrassing. So embarrassing. I had just watched The Matrix, which apparently was a big epiphany for a lot of people. Like, that movie apparently changed a lot of people's take on reality. But I came out of that movie and I was like, do I really buy into all the stuff I was raised with? This Christianity, because I did at that point still. Wow. Like, I wasn't religious per se, but like in the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, I'll go back to church. I'll end up back with God with a capital G and going to church on Sunday and being a devout Baptist. And that movie, I left that movie and I was like, oh my God, the whole nature of reality could be a fabrication. We could be, I don't know, this could all be fake. Yeah. And it just, like, that was my first panic attack.
Oh, wow.
God, it's so silly, but.
Religious crisis.
Spurred by Keanu Reeves in The Matrix.
Right.
I was also curious to know how Kat's relationship with Hazel, or with motherhood itself, has changed as a result of Hazel having cancer.
It alters you as a parent because you're still a parent. You still have to put up with the day-to-day crap of parenting. And so you think, well, my kid has cancer. I'm just going to be like this exceptional parent who's kind and gentle and patient. And you still lose your temper and you still yell at him and you still are like, oh my God, why aren't you listening to me? Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, she has cancer. I'm such a bad mother. So it's changed that, it's made it. There's a lot more guilt associated with it because anytime I yell at her or lose my temper, I'm not a big yeller, but, everybody yells that has kids. If they tell you they don't, they're lying. But it has changed in that I feel guilt that I'm not, I'm not
a saint.
Yes, which is ridiculous. Just because she has cancer doesn't mean she's still not a kid.
Yeah. Is there much like longitudinal research on children who go through chemo and...
As far as long-term
trauma stuff?
Not that I've seen. I feel like in oncology, they're just focused on curing them. Like, all they care about is curing them. And to the extent, chemo is poison, basically. I mean, you're basically poisoning their body to save it. So you're, in some ways, robbing Peter to pay Paul, because down the line, she may develop a secondary cancer from her chemo. So there's, I think they focus more on the medical aspect. I don't know how much they focus on the psychological and spiritual and psychic effects on kids.
Do you have a sense as to how she's been affected in that way?
She's tremendously empathetic, but I can't tell if she's always been that way or if that's part of her cancer treatment. She came out to the front yard. I was in the front yard working in the garden the other day. She brought a box out to me and she had sorted out toys. And not only had she sorted them out, but she made like she made up a Lego kit. She made up a kit of art supplies, and she said that she wanted to give them to other kids. And I said, what brought that up? And she goes, well, I just realized that even though I have cancer and I've been sick a lot, I still have a house. I still have a mom and dad that love me. She's 7. Like, I was astounded that she could demonstrate that much self-awareness that while it is hard for her, it's hard for others. That's a lot for a 7-year-old. I mean, I'm 42 and it's taken me a long time to get there. So I think in some ways it's probably made her more empathetic to the world, but she could have always been like that. I don't know.
And how's your marriage doing?
We've been married for, what year is this? It's almost 2022. We will have been married 23 years in July. He's my best friend. He's just very steady guy, and he's always there, and he loves our kids as much as I do, which, like, he was just an amazing father to all of our kids, but watching him with James, our medically fragile son, like, he's just amazing. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of conflict when grief comes into the picture because everybody grieves differently, and we're very different in the way we grieve and handle things. So there has been, like, sometimes I don't understand where he's coming from at all. And instead of just accepting that people grieve differently, I get annoyed. I don't know why. That's just my go-to, is to be annoyed. I don't have an explanation for it. Maybe because I feel like I'm so well balanced. Everyone else should be as well balanced as I am.
How would you characterize your different grieving styles?
Like, for me, James was here. He's my son. I loved him. He died in this, like I said, linear way we understand life and death. And I don't need the physical reminders. There's very few things I've hung on to that people gave me or gave him because those things don't symbolize him to me. There's a few things that I really think of him when I see, and so I kept those. And he's buried at our house that we're selling. His grave is at our home. We buried him at home. He died in the hospital. We brought him home immediately. No turning him over to a funeral home, nothing. We did a completely home burial, everything. We handled the visitation. We handled people visiting, seeing him. Like, it was very important for us to take care of his body. I believe we're so sheltered from death in our culture that we're afraid of it. And people used to prepare bodies and have that time to say goodbye to a grandparent or a parent, and now someone dies and they go off and we don't see them again until they're made up and stuck in a box and all waxy, and then they get buried in a vault in the ground that will never decompose for whatever reason. Like, that's a whole other thing I could spend hours talking about, but we buried him at home. For me, that's his grave. I'm fine with it staying there forever, whether we live there or not. My husband's not. He wants to move his grave, so that's caused some conflict, but we both understand that we deal with things differently. So since we have friends that are buying our house, we don't have to approach it at the moment. They've lost a child too, so they get it. So we don't have to face that head on yet.
You're listening to Time and Other Thieves, reflections and conversations on the nature of existence. I'm Sarah B., and I've been sharing parts of a conversation I recently had with local mother, writer, and veterinarian Kat Ashe. Her current work in the latter field is definitely worth mentioning.
So I do in-home euthanasia for 4 Paws Farewell now, and I started that in June of 2020 after COVID started because we were doing everything exclusively outdoors, masks, so we all felt pretty safe doing it. So I travel to people's homes and do in-home palliative care, hospice care, and the brunt of what we do is in-home euthanasia. And I thought I would hate it. I didn't think I would hate it, but I didn't think that it would bring me the amount of fulfillment it has. But it is emotionally, I'll come home from a day. We do at max 5 appointments per doctor per day. So 9, 11, 1, 3, and 4:30 is our appointment schedule. And after a full day, I'll come home and be buoyant, like just filled with gratitude that I can go to people's homes, meet their animal and their family member, in their normal environment where they're much more relaxed, much more comfortable with me. And then I meet people just every day that have amazing life experiences or stories, or it adds so much to my life to meet people through this job.
Wow. Just delivering death door to door.
Angel of death. People frequently tell me at work I'm an angel, and I'm like, angel of death. But I mean,
death is merciful.
It is. And that's why I love this job, is because death is not something we should be afraid of. It's part of life. And people always say, how can you be empathetic to people who are melting down over losing their dog when you've lost a child and your dad? And for me, the thing that's crazy is before James died, I would have been like, it's a dog. Like, I love my dog. I love my cats, but they're pets. Now, after he died, it leveled the playing field for me for grief. Like, I used to think, down here is your hamster, and next level is your great grandfather, and then your grandparents and your parents, and then a child or a spouse. And like, grief was this cake, and the top was the worst grief you could feel, and the bottom was the least grief. And now that I've been through this and I do this job, like, grief is grief.
Yeah.
Like, there's a gorgeous song called You're Not Alone by Mavis Staples. One of the lyrics is, every tear on every face tastes the same. And it's true.
Have you read much on grief or death?
Oh, God, yes. I've read everything on grief. Like, everything modern on grief. I probably haven't read the older stuff that you were talking about, but like Bearing the Unbearable was a really beautiful book by Joanne Cacciatore. It's just individual stories and how these people get through these traumatic, horrible losses that you... And she writes the chapters. The chapters are max 3 pages because that's all you can read at one time, because it's just so sad, but also so illuminating. So it was a really beautiful book. It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Meg Devine was really good. Basically saying, just because the world out there expects you to get over it in X amount of days. Like, with a kid, you get a while. Yeah. With a spouse, you get a while. If it's your cat, you get a couple days, and then you're supposed to be over it. And this was more like, grief is grief. Acknowledge what you need to feel, and don't use the world as a barometer for what normal is. I read a book that has nothing to do with that called From Here to Eternity, Traveling the World to Find a Good Death. It's written by a mortician who's also kind of an anthropologist. So she traveled around the world and witnessed different death ceremonies. She went to Tibet and or Nepal. Was it Nepal? Or she went to somewhere in Indonesia, I think it was Tibet, and witnessed a sky burial. They basically chop up the body and feed it to vultures. Wow. The idea being that we all go back to, and so she said it's a very sacred ritual. I'm like, I don't want to be the guy that has that job, but it's a person that chooses to do that job, is to like take the body apart and feed it to the vultures.
Wow.
Yeah. What else did she write about in that book? Oh, she wrote about an Indonesian island where every 3 years they exhume their dead. They dress them in new clothes.
I've heard of this.
Yes, they clean them. Actually, someone went there and took pictures of it with their permission. And they're mummified naturally, I think, there because of the environment. So it's not quite as gory, I think, as it would be here where we wouldn't naturally mummify. But they naturally mummify, or they actually do mummify them on purpose. I can't remember which. And when I first read it, I was like, that is the grossest, weirdest thing I've ever heard. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, it's really not. It's kind of beautiful in its own way. Would I be okay with it? Probably not, but I was raised in a culture that's not okay with that. Yeah. Like, it's their culture. I've read so many books on grief, I can't even remember them all. Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved by Kate Bowler. She was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer and wrote a book about her religion, which was not Baptist, but very similar. It was called The Prosperity Gospel. It's like, the more you do for God, the more prosperous you become. And so she has stage 4 metastatic colon cancer. And so it was a book about her journey to religious epiphany.
Is there anything else you want to add or want people to know?
I want people to know death isn't scary. I've seen my son die. I've seen countless beloved animals die. I was there right before my dad died. I was there when my grandfather was dying, and it's part of life, and it's not something we should fear. It's not something we should hide from. It's not shameful. It's not grotesque. It just is part of the cycle of life. We wouldn't freak out at watching a flower die in the front yard, but we freak out if a person dies. Like, right. It's part of life, and it's peaceful. And even if death is violent, it's still, at the end, it's death.
Thank you for talking with me.
I hope it was interesting.
It was.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's going to do it for this episode of Time and Other Thieves. Thanks again to Kat Ashe for coming on the show. Her daughter Hazel had her final spinal tap on January 4th, and will be on oral chemotherapy until February 13th, at which point she will be done with cancer treatments, hopefully for the rest of her life. If you'd like to read some of Kat's writing, which I highly recommend, her blog is called Loving James at lovingjamesblog.wordpress.com. You can learn more about the at-home pet euthanasia she mentioned at 4pawsfarewell.com. That's the number 4pawsfarewell.com. I'm Sarah B., and if you'd like to contact me for any reason, feel free to send an email to Sarah with an H at ashevillefm.org. I'd love to hear from you. Next week on the show, I'll be talking on my own about the book Civilization and Its Discontents by Sigmund Freud.